Chicago, 1893. The World's Fair dazzled millions with its gleaming white buildings and promises of progress. Amid the wonder stood a massive hotel built by charming pharmacist H. Holmes. Guests checked in, but many never checked out. Behind the facade lay hidden passages, soundproof rooms, a dissection table, and a crematorium. Holmes lured young women with jobs and marriage promises, only to trap, torture, and kill them for profit. The fair celebrated the future. Holmes embodied its darkest shadow, a serial killer who turned the city of dreams into a house of horrors. 1. The charismatic pharmacist and the World's Fair dream. Chicago in the late 1880s was a city on fire with ambition. The air reeked of stockyards, coal smoke, and the sharp tang of opportunity. Railroads converged from every direction, disgorging immigrants, dreamers, and hustlers into a metropolis that had risen from the ashes of the Great Fire of 1871. By 1889, the population had soared past 1 million, making it the second largest city in America. Skyscrapers clawed at the sky, electric lights banished the night, and the roar of industry never ceased. It was a place where fortunes were made overnight and lost just as quickly. Into this whirlwind stepped a slight, impeccably dressed young man with piercing blue eyes, a neatly waxed mustache, and a disarming smile. He called himself Dr. H. Holmes, though his real name was Herman Webster Mudgett. Born in 1861 in the quiet town of Gilmanton, New Hampshire, to a strict Methodist family, Mudgett had always been different. Neighbors remembered him as intelligent, but unsettling. Rumors swirled of childhood experiments on animals, of a fascination with skeletons and death that seemed far too mature for a boy. At 16, he graduated high school with top honors. By 19, he was married to Clara Lovering, though the union produced a son and little else before he abandoned them. Mudgett enrolled in the University of Vermont's medical program, but soon transferred to the more prestigious University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, graduating in 1884 with a medical degree. There he owned skills that would serve him far beyond healing anatomy, dissection, pharmacology. Classmates noted his charm. He could talk his way into anything, and his cold curiosity. He began small insurance scams, taking out policies on fictitious people or using cadavers from the university lab to fake deaths and collect payouts. No one suspected the polite, well-spoken student. After graduation, Mudgett drifted. He worked briefly as a teacher, then a pharmacist in various towns, changing names as often as jobs. Henry Howard Holmes, H.M. Howard, Henry Gordon. Bigamy became routine. He married Myrta Belknap in 1887, while still legally tied to Clara, fathering a daughter. Then later married Georgiana Yoke in 1894, without divorcing either. Each wife brought money or property. Each was kept ignorant of the others. By 1886, he had arrived in Chicago, drawn by tales of easy wealth in a city rebuilding itself into something grand. he found work at a drugstore in the bustling suburb of Inglewood, at the corner of 63rd and Wallace Streets. The owner, Mrs. Dr. E.S. Holton, was elderly and ailing. Her husband had recently died of cancer. Holmes proved indispensable, charming customers, managing inventory, boosting sales with his smooth salesmanship. When Mrs. Holton vanished, shortly after selling him the pharmacy in 1887, no one asked too many questions. Holmes simply took over the business, explaining she had moved to California for her health. The truth, whatever it was, remained buried. Now established as a respectable pharmacist, Holmes turned his gaze to the greatest opportunity of the era. In 1890, Congress awarded Chicago the World's Columbian Exposition to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage. Delayed a year, it would open in 1893. The fair promised to outshine Paris's 1889 triumph, showcasing American ingenuity with massive neoclassical buildings, electric lights, moving sidewalks, and wonders from around the globe. Organizers predicted 20 million visitors over 6 months, young women seeking secretarial jobs, tourists flush with cash, lonely travelers far from home. Holmes saw not culture or progress, but prey. Inglewood lay just blocks from the fairgrounds in Jackson Park. Thousands of temporary hotels and boarding houses sprang up to accommodate the influx. Holmes purchased the vacant lot across from his drugstore and announced plans for a grand mixed-use building, retail on the ground floor, apartments above, and a hotel for fair visitors. He secured loans easily. His charm worked wonders on bankers, and construction began in 1888. To the public, Holmes was the picture of upward mobility. He dressed impeccably in tailored suits, spoke with educated precision, and courted local society. Women found him magnetic. Men trusted his business acumen. He joined civic groups, donated to charities, and presented himself as a forward-thinking entrepreneur who would profit honorably from the fair's glory. But, privately, his mind raced with darker blueprints. Medical school had taught him the human body's fragility. Scams had taught him greed's power. The fair would bring thousands of unattached young women, stenographers, shop girls, actresses, many with savings or jewelry, many without family nearby. A hotel could house them temporarily. Soundproof rooms could silence screams. Hidden passages could conceal movement. A basement kiln could erase evidence. Holmes began sketching designs unlike any ordinary hotel. He envisioned over 100 rooms, many windowless, connected by secret doors and stairways leading nowhere. There would be airtight vaults, gas pipes in bedrooms, chutes dropping directly to the cellar. He would hire crews, pay them poorly, then fire them before they understood the full layout, ensuring no single worker knew the building's true purpose. As the white city's plaster palaces rose in Jackson Park, gleaming symbols of order and light, Holmes's brick fortress took shape across town. To passers-by it looked merely eccentric, a bulky castle-like structure with odd angles and turrets. Locals called it the Castle. Holmes preferred World's Fair Hotel. By 1892, with the fair's opening approaching, Holmes was ready. He stocked his pharmacy with patent medicines and lured employees with generous wages. Pretty young women were especially welcome: typists, cashiers, assistants. He flirted shamelessly, promised advancement, hinted at marriage. Some moved into apartments in his building for convenience. The city buzzed with excitement. Architects like Daniel Burnham and Frederick Law Olmsted crafted a utopian vision of lagoons, statues, and illuminated fountains. Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla competed to light the grounds. George Ferris unveiled his gigantic wheel. Millions prepared to visit the dream made real. Holmes prepared too. He installed a massive vault in his office, a dissection table in the basement, and a crematory kiln capable of reducing bodies to ash. Acid barrels stood ready. Surgical tools gleamed. The charismatic pharmacist smiled at customers buying headache powders, all while calculating how many visitors might never leave his castle. The White City would celebrate humanity's brightest future. Holmes would exploit its darkest present. In the shadow of progress, America's first modern serial killer had found his perfect stage. Tooney, constructing the Castle of Death, the corner of 63rd and Wallace in Inglewood, was an unremarkable patch of Chicago suburb in 1888. Quiet streets lined with modest homes, a few shops, and the constant rumble of trains heading to the stockyards. It was far enough from downtown's chaos to feel respectable, yet close enough to the future fairgrounds in Jackson Park to promise profit. H. Holmes saw perfection, isolated enough for secrecy, accessible enough for victims. He purchased the vacant lot across from his newly acquired drugstore for $10,000, using loans secured with his trademark charm. Construction began almost immediately. To the outside world, the project was straightforward. A 3-story mixed-use building to capitalize on the coming World's Fair crowds. Retail spaces on the ground floor would house his pharmacy and other shops. The upper floors would offer apartments and hotel rooms for visitors. Holmes presented sketches showing grand storefronts, bay windows, and a turreted roof that gave it a whimsical, almost castle-like appearance. Locals nodded approvingly. It would bring business to the neighborhood. But the blueprints Holmes submitted to city inspectors were only a fraction of the truth. He kept the real designs locked in his office, revising them obsessively. The building would span nearly a full block, 100 feet wide, 162 feet deep, with over 100 rooms. Many would have no windows. Doors would open onto brick walls. Staircases would end abruptly at ceilings. Hallways would twist into dead ends. It was a maze deliberately designed to confuse and trap. Holmes financed the project through a web of deception. He ordered materials on credit from dozens of suppliers. Bricks from one, lumber from another. Steel beams from a third, then delayed payments or refused delivery once goods arrived, claiming defects. Lawsuits piled up, but he stalled them with charm or countersuits. Contractors were hired and fired in rapid succession. No crew worked long enough to grasp the full layout. Carpenters who asked too many questions about odd features, like sealed rooms or gas pipes in bedrooms, were dismissed immediately. It's for experimental purposes. Holmes would say smoothly, or ventilation innovations. Workers shrugged and moved on. Jobs were scarce. The ground floor featured wide plate, glass windows for the pharmacy and rental shops, giving an impression of openness. Holmes installed a large walk-in vault in his office, officially for storing valuable drugs and cash. In reality, it was airtight, with hidden gas lines running from the basement. Guests could be locked inside and asphyxiated silently. The second floor housed apartments and hotel suites, many soundproofed with asbestos lining. Some bedrooms had peepholes for observation. Others connected to secret passages, allowing Holmes to enter unseen. A few contained trapdoors in the floor. A lever in his private bedroom could drop a victim directly to the cellar below, via a greased chute. For laundry, he told curious workers. The third floor was the most bizarre, a warren of small, windowless rooms with angled ceilings and false partitions. Some had iron rings bolted to walls, officially for hanging curtains. Doors locked only from the outside. One room featured a wooden chute leading straight to the basement dissection area. The basement was the heart of darkness. Holmes excavated it deeply, installing a massive brick kiln capable of reaching crematory temperatures. Beside it stood acid-resistant vats for dissolving flesh, a large surgical table, stainless steel with drains, weighted under bright gas lamps. Shelves lined the walls for chemicals, surgical tools, and bottles of chloroform. A hidden staircase connected directly to Holmes's personal quarters, allowing nighttime access without disturbing tenants. Construction dragged into 1892 as the fair's opening approached. Holmes rushed completion of the street, facing portions, while leaving the interior labyrinth unfinished. He rented out shops to legitimate businesses, a jewelry store, a barber, a restaurant, to maintain appearances and generate income. Upstairs, he installed furnishings, fine oak beds, velvet curtains, gas fixtures in every room. The pipes, however, ran not just to lights, but to hidden valves he controlled from his office. Neighbors grew accustomed to the eccentric building. Children called it Holmes's Castle, for its turrets and odd shape. Passers-by admired the bustling pharmacy, where the handsome doctor dispensed medicines with a smile. Women lingered at the counter, drawn by his flirtations. Holmes began advertising for female employees, stenographers, cashiers, housekeepers. Excellent wages and accommodations provided, The notices read, "Many applicants were young, single, new to Chicago, perfect for what he had in mind. He tested features discreetly. A troublesome creditor vanished after visiting the vault to discuss payment. A former worker who threatened to expose unpaid wages disappeared. No bodies surfaced. The kiln worked perfectly. By spring 1893, as the White City's final touches were applied, statues gleaming, lagoons filling, electric lights being strung, Holmes's castle stood ready. The fair opened on May 1 with fanfare. President Grover Cleveland pressed a button, and thousands of bulbs illuminated the night. Visitors poured in by trainloads. Holmes hung a sign, "World's Fair Hotel, rooms by day or week." Rates were reasonable. Amenities promised comfort. The location was convenient. Streetcars ran directly to Jackson Park. Inside, the traps waited. Holmes moved through his creation like a spider in its web. He knew every secret door, every false wall, every valve. Tenants came and went on the upper floors, unaware of the horrors below. Shopkeepers conducted business oblivious to the chutes overhead. The castle was complete, a machine built not for lodging, but for murder. As millions marveled at America's triumph of light and order, Holmes prepared to exploit the chaos. The fair would provide endless victims, women with money, jewelry, or simply lives no one would miss. He would lure them with charm, trap them with architecture, kill them with science, and profit from their remains. The devil had built his palace in the shadow of paradise, and the doors were now open for business. 40. The insurance scams and gruesome experiments. By the summer of 1893, H. Holmes had perfected murder into a cold, efficient business. The castle operated like a factory. Victims entered through the front door, as guests or employees moved through the labyrinth of rooms, and exited, if at all, only as profit. Holmes killed not from rage or passion, but from calculation. Every death served a purpose: insurance money, silence, or simple practice. He approached each one with the detached precision of a surgeon, the cunning of a con man, and the curiosity of a sadist. His primary motive was always financial. Holmes carried multiple life insurance policies on himself, his wives, his employees, and fictitious people he invented. When a victim proved useful, he convinced them to take out policies, naming him beneficiary, promising to pay premiums himself as part of their future together. Julia Connor, Emmeline Sigrand, and Minnie Williams all signed such documents, believing his lies about shared wealth. Once the policy was in force, the victim became a liability to be liquidated. Methods varied according to convenience and mood. The simplest was the vault in his office, an airtight steel chamber, disguised as a safe. He would invite a victim inside to view valuables or hide from an imaginary threat. The door clanged shut, the hidden gas valve opened, and chloroform, or natural gas, flooded the space. Victims clawed at the walls, suffocated silently. Holmes listened through a speaking tube, timing death to the minute. For those he wished to prolong, the soundproof rooms on the upper floors offered privacy. He bound them to beds or iron rings, starved them, or experimented with poisons. Some were stretched on a medieval-style rack he built in the basement. Others endured vivisection while conscious. Holmes probing organs, testing pain thresholds, satisfying the fascination that began with childhood animal dissections. Women's screams never escaped the asbestos-lined walls. Disposal was systematic. Bodies slid down greased chutes to the cellar, landing near the surgical table. There, under bright gaslights, Holmes worked methodically. He stripped clothing and jewelry, items sold later, through his shop or pawned. Flesh was removed with scalpel's honed razor, sharp from his medical days. Bones were boiled clean or dissolved in acid vats. The massive kiln, fueled by coal and capable of 2,000 degrees, reduced remains to ash and fragments. Teeth were pulverized. Hair burned separately to avoid telltale smoke. The cleaned skeletons were his most profitable product. Chicago's medical schools hungered for anatomical specimens, paying $25 to $200 each with few questions asked. Holmes articulated them professionally, wiring joints, mounting on stands, and sold them anonymously. Some bore marks of his experiments, drilled skulls, sawn limbs, evidence of torture. Buyers assumed they came from legal sources. Demand was high, supply discreet. When fire or acid proved insufficient, quicklime pits in the basement dissolved what remained. The castle's drains ran red some nights, but Holmes scrubbed meticulously. He kept trophies, locks of hair, rings, letters stored in secret drawers as reminders of success. The most elaborate scam involved his accomplice Benjamin Pitezel, a carpenter and petty criminal who helped with construction. In 1894, after the fair closed and money ran low, Holmes convinced Pitezel to fake his own death for a $10,000 insurance payout. They purchased a policy naming Pitezel's wife beneficiary. The plan used a cadaver from a medical supplier, burn it beyond recognition in a rented Philadelphia house, collect the money. But Holmes betrayed even his partner. He killed the real Pitezel with chloroform in September 1894, staged the body with alcohol and a pipe to suggest accidental explosion, and collected the insurance himself. To cover tracks, he then murdered Pitezel's 3 children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, whom Mrs. Pitezel had entrusted to him. The girls were gassed in a trunk in Toronto. Howard dismembered and burned in Indianapolis. Holmes traveled with the bodies, forging letters from the children to their mother to delay suspicion. These post-fair killings marked Holmes's descent into pure destruction, with the castle's income drying up as visitors left Chicago. He grew reckless. He sold the building in 1895, but retained basement access, continuing experiments on vagrants or debtors. His cruelty extended beyond death. Survivors existed, women who escaped seduction or sensed danger and fled. Some employees quit after hearing odd noises or finding bloodstains. But most victims had no one to notice their absence. In an era of constant migration, a missing stenographer was simply someone who moved west. Holmes later boasted of refining techniques, determining how long a person could survive in the vault, how much chloroform produced unconsciousness without death, how acid dissolved bone most efficiently. He viewed himself as a scientist advancing knowledge, though only for his profit and pleasure. By late 1894, creditors closed in. The castle changed hands multiple times. Tenants complained of strange smells, and rumors spread. Holmes fled Chicago, continuing scams across America, bigamy in Denver, horse theft in Texas, murder in Canada. But the Pitezel insurance fraud proved his undoing. Pinkerton detectives, hired by the insurer, noted discrepancies. Survivor accounts accumulated. When Holmes was arrested in Boston in November 1894 for unrelated fraud, the trail led back to Chicago. The castle waited, its secrets intact, its horrors preserved in lime and ash. Holmes had turned murder into industry, efficient, profitable, merciless. And the full extent was only beginning to surface. 5e, the investigation and the House of Horrors revealed. The World's Fair closed its gates on October 30, 1893, after drawing over 27 million visitors. The White City, once ablaze with electric wonder, began its slow dismantling, plaster buildings crumbling, exhibits crated away. Chicago exhaled, returning to its gritty reality. For H. Holmes, the end of the fair meant the end of easy prey. Creditors circled his overextended empire. The castle's hotel rooms emptied. He sold the building in 1895 to a new owner, but retained secret access to the basement through hidden arrangements. Holmes fled Chicago, embarking on a cross-country spree of fraud and murder. He bigamously married Georgiana Yoke in Denver, swindled investors in Texas, and continued the deadly insurance scheme with Benjamin Pitezel. But betrayal bred suspicion. Pitezel's widow, Carrie, grew uneasy when promised payouts never arrived and her children's letters, supposedly from Holmes's care, sounded oddly stilted. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Marion Hedgepeth, a train robber jailed in St. Louis. Holmes had shared a cell with him briefly and confided a $10,000 insurance scam plan, promising Hedgepeth a cut for recommending a shady lawyer. When no money came, Hedgepeth tipped off authorities anonymously. Watch a man calling himself H. Holmes? He's up to no good with insurance. Pinkerton detectives, already investigating the Pitezel policy for Fidelity Mutual Life, took notice. Philadelphia police had ruled Pitezel's charred death accidental, paying out the claim. But Detective Frank Geyer, a dogged veteran, reopened the case in 1894 after inconsistencies surfaced. Holmes, arrested in Boston that November for unrelated horse theft in Texas, tried charm on interrogators. He admitted the fraud but claimed Pitezel faked his death and fled. 2. Prove. He produced a body, actually Pitezel's, murdered by chloroform. Geyer wasn't convinced. He traced Holmes's travels, discovering the Pitezel children had accompanied him. In July 1895, Geyer located a rented house in Toronto where Holmes had stayed. Digging in the cellar, he unearthed the buried bodies of Alice and Nellie Pitezel, gassed in a large trunk. Howard's remains surfaced in Indianapolis, dismembered, partially burned in a cottage stove. The children's deaths shattered any lingering doubt. Holmes was no mere swindler. News exploded nationwide. The multi-murderer Holmes. Chicago authorities, long dismissive of missing persons, reports from the Fair era, finally raided the castle at 63rd and Wallace. The new owner, unaware of its secrets, allowed entry. What investigators found turned even seasoned policemen pale. The labyrinth revealed itself room by room. Secret doors swung open onto brick walls. Staircases ended in ceilings. Trapdoors dropped to the greased chute. The airtight vault stood intact, its interior scratched by desperate fingernails. Soundproof chambers contained iron rings, blood-stained restraints, and women's clothing hidden in false compartments. The basement was a charnel house. The surgical table bore grooves from drains, stained dark. Acid vats still held corrosive residue and bone fragments. The massive kiln contained charred human remains buttons, shoe buckles, teeth that survived the flames. Quicklime pits yielded partially dissolved skeletons. Investigators recovered hairpins, corset stays. A woman's watch stopped at midnight, and pieces of bone from at least a dozen individuals. Personal effects linked to known victims surfaced. Julia Connor's jewelry, Emmeline Cigrand's correspondence, Minnie Williams's property deeds, forged in Holmes's hand. Bloody footprints matched missing women's shoes. A child's doll, Pearl Connor's, lay discarded in a hidden closet. Holmes, extradited to Philadelphia for the Pitezel murder, watched the revelations from jail. He began confessing, first casually, then dramatically. In interviews with journalists, he admitted 27 murders, describing methods with chilling detachment: gassing, poisoning, starvation, vivisection. He claimed some victims were still alive when dissected. Others begged for mercy he ignored. Later, he recanted, blaming accomplices or denying everything. Estimates of his true toll ranged from 20 to over 200. Many fair visitors remained forever unidentified. The trial in Philadelphia began October 1895. Prosecutors focused on Pitezel's murder to secure conviction, evidence strongest there. Holmes defended himself, cross-examining witnesses with theatrical flair, charming reporters between sessions. But the jury took only hours to find him guilty. Sentence: death by hanging. While awaiting execution at Moyamensing Prison, Holmes sold his confession to newspapers for 10,000, spinning lurid tales some true, many fabricated. He claimed to have been born evil, his face changing color with kills. He insured his own life for vast sums, planning one final scam from beyond the grave. On May 7, 1896, Holmes mounted the scaffold in Philadelphia. Calm to the end, he chatted with the hangman about rope quality. The trap dropped, his neck broke instantly. His final request, encase his body in concrete to prevent grave robbery or dissection. Even in death, he feared becoming a specimen. The castle's fate mirrored its creators. Arsonists torched it shortly after the search. Perhaps Holmes's agents, destroying evidence. Perhaps outraged citizens. What remained was demolished. The site became a post office. Today, nothing marks the spot. Holmes's legend grew. Bullocks called him America's first modern serial killer, a charming psychopath who industrialized murder amid national celebration. The fair's triumph of light contrasted perfectly with his abyss of darkness. Yet questions lingered. How many truly died in the castle? Did accomplices escape justice? Were bodies sold to more than medical schools? The House of Horrors revealed its secrets too late for most victims. In the end, the devil lost his castle, but won immortality as the architect of nightmare. As the noose tightened on that Philadelphia scaffold in May 1896, H. Holmes, America's devil in human form, finally met the end he had dealt to so many others. The castle he built, that monstrous machine of murder, was reduced to rubble and ash, its secrets scattered on the wind. The white city of the World's Fair had long since vanished, leaving only photographs of a dream that once was. Yet some nightmares refuse to die. Holmes confessed to 27 killings, but the true number may never be known. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, swallowed by his labyrinth during the fair's glittering months. Young women who came to Chicago chasing opportunity, only to vanish into acid vats and kiln flames. Their names, their stories, their screams, erased as efficiently as their bones. He was the shadow cast by progress itself, charming, brilliant, utterly remorseless. A man who turned celebration into slaughter, architecture into torture, medicine into murder. In an age that believed humanity was marching toward light, Holmes proved how thin the veneer of civilization truly is. Today, nothing marks the site of the murder castle. A post office stands where bodies once slid down greased chutes. The fairgrounds are parks and museums, but on quiet nights, some say the Inglewood air still carries a faint chemical tang, or that footsteps echo in rooms that no longer exist. Thank you for walking these dark corridors with me. If this tale of the devil in the White City left you unsettled, leave a like, subscribe for more journeys into history's forgotten horrors, and tell me in the comments, how many do you think he truly killed? Until the next shadow falls. Sleep carefully. If this descent into H. Holmes and his murder castle left you speechless, or checking your hotel doors twice, then you belong here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now so you never miss a new chapter from history's darkest corners. Give this video a like to let the algorithm know you crave more real life horrors like this. And most importantly, drop a comment below. How many victims do you believe Holmes truly claimed? The confessed 27, or over 200? Your comments keep these forgotten stories alive. Thank you for watching. New tale of terror drops every week. See you in the next shadow.